It's good to see you here this morning. Happy St. Patty's Day. I think you say that back. Happy St. Patrick's Day. Kadmiel and Falcha. 1,000 welcomes to you. And it's good to see you all here on this morning. We're going to have kind of a nice, fun morning as well. But I also wanted to start off this morning by acknowledging something pretty sad for our community. Most of you all knew a good friend, Reverend Dr. Lynn Deloney, who was on staff at our church part-time, but he was in charge of contemplative sort of studies and leading a number of prayer groups online and then in person, and was just very active in sort of being that compassionate, gentle presence for many of us in our lives, and also would show up. We always laughed and joked that Lynn would show up in the hallways. Even if he wasn't present, his spirit was still always around somewhere because he just had this gentleness about him. Somewhere along the line, he was called Zen Lynn, and that stuck with him. And we lost Zen Lynn over this last week on Thursday. It was Thursday afternoon. He and his wife, Becca, as many of you know, he'd been dealing with cancer, but mostly he'd been dealing with the effects of having just radical chemotherapy as a child, and it had just wreaked havoc on him over the years. And so this was all kind of culminating in the last year or so. And so one of the things he wanted to do was to travel to Destin, Florida. It was a bucket list item, and some things he wanted to do out there, including parasailing and then walking along the beach. And then doing some skydiving. There he is, parasailing. He got to do that. And it was just a beautiful time that they had out there, and poetically, again, there's his cool little wheelchair buggy that had these perfect wheels for the sand. So it kind of in line with who Lynn was and how he learned how to live fully and also how to die fully. Lynn was then taking a walk after parasailing, and as many of you probably read on the Carrying Bridge report, he walked out into the water and fell to his knees and then collapsed. And so while it's tragic and while it's been sad, Lynn lived a life that really was a model for all of us in terms of compassion, but also how to live fully in our moments, how to be present in our moments, even in our dying moments, how to be so fully present that it feels like the biggest life one can live in even such moments, and that's what Lynn has taught us to do. So we wanted to acknowledge Lynn with one of his favorite songs and invite you all to sing along with us. We don't have details on a memorial service, which will be happening probably in April, and I imagine it will be happening at First Methodist Church, but we'll get more details on that later, where we can really celebrate Lynn. But we'll celebrate him this morning in spirit, singing one of his favorite artists, Carrie Newcomer, and this song, Gathering of Spirits. I invite you to join along with us.
Here we go.
Let it go, my love, my truest. Let it sail on silver wings. Life's a twinkling, that's for certain. It's such a fine thing. There's a gathering of spirits, and there's a festival of friends. And we'll take up where we left off, and we'll all meet again. I can't explain it, couldn't if I tried. How the only things we carry are the things we hold inside, like a day in the open, like a love we won't forget, like the laughter that we started and it hasn't died down yet. Oh, let it go, my love, my truest. Let it sail on silver wings. Life's a twinkling, that's for certain. But it's such a fine thing. There's a gathering of spirits, and there's a festival of friends. And we'll take up where we left off when we all meet again. Oh yeah, now didn't we? And don't we make it shine? Aren't we standing in the center of something rare and fine, so glow like embers? Or like light through colored glass. Some give it all in one great flame, throwing kisses as they pass. Oh, let it go, my love, my truest. Let it sail on silver wings. Life's a twinkling, that's for certain. But it's such a fine thing. There's a gathering of spirits, and there's a festival of friends. And we'll take up east of Eden, but there's heaven in our midst, and we're never really all that far from those we love and miss. Wade out in the water, there's a glory all around, and the wise say there's 1,000 ways to kneel and kiss the ground. Oh, let it go, my love, my truest, let it sail on silver wings. Life's a twinkling, that's for certain, but it's such a fine thing. There's a gathering of spirits, there's a festival of friends, and we'll take her where we left off when we all meet again. And we'll take up where we left off when we all meet again.
Wade out in the water.
If y'all were watching the lyrics, you could see so much of Lynn's own words, even in these lyrics, 1,000 ways to kneel and kiss the ground. We're never really all that far from the ones we love and miss. So it's appropriate, I suppose, in a way that we're celebrating St. Patrick's Day, that it falls on this Sunday, because St. Patrick, although credited with being the saint that Christianized Ireland, that's probably more of a myth than a truth. Celtic Christianity itself became a model, perhaps, for one of the best ways to be involved with faith and spirituality in the world, and are looking at what is the nature of reality and what is the nature of a more ecocentric reality is really grounded in that same kind of understanding, that same kind of intimate relationship with reality as sacred. Something that the Celts celebrated, still to this day in their deepest tradition celebrate, something that Lynn was all about in celebrating. And we didn't want to miss the opportunity to have some fun to start off a Celtic celebration and a Celtic Christian focus, then starting off with a song about St. Patrick. So. St. Patrick was a gentleman, he came from decent people. In Dublin town he built a church and on it built a steeple. His father was a Callahan, his mother was a Brady, his auntie an O'Shaughnessy and his uncle an O'Grady.
And here's to old St. Paddy's fist, he was a saint so clever. He'd get sticks and toads a twist and banish them forever.
There's not a mile in Erin's Isle where the dirty vermin musters, where he put his deer 4 foot while he murdered them in clusters. The toads went hop, and the frogs went plop, snapped down in the water, and the beasts committed suicide to save themselves from slaughter.
Then here's to old St. Paddy's fist, he was a saint so clever. He'd give the snakes and toads a twist and banish them forever.
Where the Wicklow hills are very high, and so the hills of House, sir. And there's a hill much bigger still and higher than them both, sir. 'Twas on the top of this high hill St. Patrick set his armament, and drove the frogs into the bogs and banished all the vermin.
Then here's to old St. Paddy's fist, he was a saint so clever. He'd give the snakes and toads a twist and banish them forever. And here's to old St. Paddy's fist, he was a saint so clever. He'd give the snakes and toads a twist and banish them forever.
And if you'll join me in our welcome greeting, Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving. It doesn't matter. Ours is not a caravan of despair. Come, even if you have broken your vows 1,000 times, come yet again.
Thank you, John. Good morning, 1111. Top of the morning to you, 1111. Would y'all please stand and sing with us? We dove deep into the 1111 hymnal and found an old hymn that I don't think we sung before with brand new lyrics that we hope you enjoy. And also, when we were planning this service this week, we wanted to give it this Celtic feel. And we said, what's the most Celtic Irish guy that we know that we could bring in? That would be David Rosario. Don't you agree? It's good to have David back. Okay, here we go. Lyrics are on the screen. And it's also time to bring your offering on up to the table here. Here we go. Wake now my senses and hear the earth call. Feel the deep power of being in awe. Keep with the web of creation your vow. Giving, receiving as love shows us how. All right. Verse 2. Wake now my reason, reach out to the new. Join with each pilgrim who quest for the true. Honor the beauty and wisdom of time. Suffer thy limit and praise the sublime. All right. Verse 3. Wake now compassion, give heed to the cry. Voices of suffering fill the white sky. Take as your neighbor, both stranger and friend, praying and striving their hardship to end. Oh yeah. There. Now, if you would, take a moment and offer one another a sign of peace, or a pinch if they're not wearing green, you know. Stones will cry in G though.
Good morning, good morning. Oh, okay. We ready? Okay, this morning's reading are various passages from the Gospel according to Luke. Then Jesus said, "There once was a man who had 2 sons. The younger said to his father, 'I want right now what's coming to me.' He took his inheritance and left. Sometime later, and completely broke, he came to his senses." As Jesus reached the descent from the Mount of Olives, the entire crowd of disciples joined them and began to rejoice and praise God loudly for the display of power. They had seen the display of power they had seen, saying, "Blessed is the one who comes in the name of our God. Peace in heaven and glory in the highest." Some of the Pharisees in the crowd said to Jesus, "Teacher, rebuke your disciples." Jesus replied, "I tell you, if they were to keep silent, these very stones would cry out." Then coming within sight of Jerusalem, Jesus wept over it and said, "If only you had known the path to peace today."
Thank you, Kurt. We're going to invite y'all to sing another song with us. We're entering our Kairos time, which might be the most Lynn Deloney-ish part of this service, honestly. So just invite you to be comfortable. Sing this song Elena's going to lead. Here we go.
If I'm still, the stones will cry. If I'm still, the trees will clap their hands. If I'm still, the mountains will roar. If I'm still, the ocean will whisper. If I'm still, houses will cry out instead of me. Instead of me. If I'm still, the stones will cry. If I'm still, the trees will clap their hands. If I'm still, the mountains will roar. Who can hide the secret revealed? Who can stop the running fire? Like a deer that's thirsting for water, I long for more of you. I long for more of you. If I'm still, the stones will cry. If I'm still, the trees will clap their hands. If I'm still, mountains will roar. If I'm still, the ocean will whisper. If I'm still, the houses will cry out instead of me. Instead of me.
That was lovely. And Brad, I think we're on the same wavelength. I'd like to dedicate this Kairos time to Len and to Becca. So we'll start with Daily Word, and the focus today is world peace. I join in the emerging presence of peace. Even as the world seems asleep to peace, I commit to help its awakening. By centering my mind and heart on peaceful thoughts and deeds, my serene bearing contributes to peace on earth. I envision world peace and hold steady in my faith that it is unfolding. I do my spiritual work so I can move freely, express the emerging consciousness of peace. I pray often, give generously, forgive easily. As I'm healed and cleansed, I envision love, redemption, reconciliation in the hearts of all humanity. With faith in the unfolding love of Spirit, and with a tender and humble heart, I bring my peace to the world. I trust the emerging power of peace in hearts like mine around the world. So I'd invite you to be in a comfortable position. It's a brief guided meditation. And closing your eyes or gently lowering your gaze, whatever feels most comfortable for you. Perhaps just taking a few deep breaths. Tuning in the sensations of breath within the body. No need to think about the breath or change the rhythm. Just tuning into this breath, this moment. Perhaps envisioning a bright light above your head, shining into your body love, hope, peace. And as we start to bring this Kairos moment to a close, I am a wee bit Irish, so I'm going to share an Irish blessing with you. Lucky stars above you, sunshine on your way, many friends to love you, joy in work and play, laughter to outweigh each care, in your heart a song, and gladness waiting everywhere, all your whole life long.
Thank you, Cynthia. And thanks for that tradition, that Irish blessing at the end. I wanted to take just a quick moment to also thank Peter for providing Irish flute music downstairs as you walked in. That was very nice. Here's how much fun this service is and what I love about this service, because if y'all know me, I'm probably the least organized person around. And so, yes, we plan for a lot of things to happen, but then, of course, we improvise a lot. We end up doing that a lot in this service and in this community. And that's kind of a way of spirituality in a lot of ways for us as well. And so I kind of try to do that manifesting in my mind as I was driving to work the church this morning, because I knew I had to teach a class. I'd barely have time to do anything over here before the service. And I just kept thinking in my mind, folks are going to show up and take care of things. People are just going to show up and take care of things. Peter's going to show up and start playing Irish music on his flute. And I was going to text you and say, please bring it, but I just thought I'll just throw it out there, see what happens. Someone's going to bring something green to eat. And then they show up. Someone's going to write a green sign that says welcome, sort of a Celtic artistic kind of thing. And then sure enough, Michael did that in the back. And by the way, Michael is here with Kagan. We see Kagan in the back. Kagan and her hubby Michael from Maryland, right, Michael? And then you teach in D.C.? In Maryland, yeah. Okay, so really love having you down here. Thanks so much for being here. And we'll see more of Kagan in the weeks to come as well. So make sure you say hello to her as you're heading out later on. And just how things come together, it's always kind of fun and beautiful. And I appreciate your willingness to kind of also experience what is offered in the moment, kind of non-judgmentally, as things sometimes fall in place and other times they don't. But it doesn't matter. It all sort of is the mess that we find ourselves living in the midst of. And which is anything I'm saying today. Lynn and I go so far back, and we have been such good friends over the years that anything I would say and he would say, you'd find out that we're sort of overlapping each other. Even our love for storytelling. When I first showed up at one of his retreats back in 1986, and he was doing a retreat for adults with cancer, and it was both a recovery and in the midst of treatment kind of retreat out at first at Lyle Lodge, and then it was up in Oklahoma. I forget the site that we were there, and the first time I met Lynn and he was doing that, he says, I'm so glad you could come. He'd heard of me, knew I was a minister, and seen me do some things. He said, I want you to do storytelling with these folks and help them find their story in the midst of this journey. And I said, awesome. And then he said, and by the way, we have Patch Adams, and I didn't know who Patch Adams was at the time. Patch Adams is going to be here. And I thought, okay, who's Patch Adams? And he said, well, he's a clown. And I looked at him and I said, clowns are going to be here? And he said, I'm not sure if I'm using this microphone. I'll just use the headset here. But Lynn said, yes, we have clowns. Do you have a problem with clowns? And I don't know. I think I was shaking at the point. There's only a few things that truly scare me in life. And it's odd that clowns would do that, but this is a story that goes way back to my childhood. So I won't tell you that story. But it was interesting because in the process of that weekend, a lot of things were transformed or transmutated, as it might be, as I began to understand a different way of thinking about clowns altogether. And a way in which, by putting on a mask, can sometimes be the most honest and true thing you can do at the moment and provides a path for more vulnerability. And that's ultimately where we all need to be, is this place of vulnerability and willingness to be in our rawest self with affirmation. And I didn't know that until I got a chance to be there that weekend and experience that. So I appreciate you all being here and this chance to sort of look at Celtic spirituality, especially kind of in light of our friend Lynn, and also to sort of think about this journey in terms of the Celtic spiritual theme. Celtic spirituality, if anything, is about an intimate relationship with one's place, with one's space. But it's particularly focused on, of course, our relationship with our ecosystem or our natural reality. But it's also just simply about understanding the place that we are in and being as intimately related in that place as we can, which is a difficult thing in our modern age because of, number one, because, how much nature are we in from day to day with being in kind of a concrete urban reality. But at the same time, it's also challenging because we spend a lot of time insulated from one another and from life. And our technology, even if we're present now, our technology kind of insulates us in ways because we're less focused and attentive to our space. So one of the places where I found being in a space challenging is with children's sermons. And I'm going to tell you a quick children's sermon to kind of set a little bit of the tone for the rest of this talk. I don't like children's sermons. I used to do them all the time when I was a pastor in a church. And I got to where I would just tell stories that were more for the adults than for the kids because I just couldn't relate. And when I think I transferred my fear of clowns to my fear of toddlers and preschoolers. It literally, like when I would be hired to go to a school, they'd say, well, we'd like for you to tell to the whole elementary, we'd like for you to start with the pre-K and then go all the way up to the 6th grade. And I go, how about if I just start with the 3rd grade and go all the way to the 6th grade? It was just difficult because, it's a different way of relating. Now that I'm I guess I'm a little bit wiser maybe, and I recognize that there's deep wisdom in that innocence of play and that spontaneity and that vulnerability that's present in youngest children that we lose. We lose it pretty quickly. And so I was doing a children's time, and it was a focus on stewardship. And so I got the kids all gathered around, and, I used the microphone, and it's a fairly good, about 150 people in the congregation, about 15 kids up front, mostly young children. And I said, so how many of you all get an allowance? And then most of the hands went up, and they all said, yeah. And then some of them shouted out, I get 50 cents. And someone said, I get $5. And the kids looked over at him like, well, who's your parents? It's like, but they all got some kind of allowance. And then I said, and I suppose you're taught to save your allowance. How do you save your allowance? And they kind of looked at me a little confused, like they didn't really know what I meant by that. I mean, some of them said, well, I save it, but they just sort of stared at me. And I said, well, you know, it's important to sort of set aside and take care of our money and our resources and sort of to save them. I'm thinking of a particular animal that stores stuff and lives in a tree. And they all looked at each other, confused. And then I said it a little more clearly. You know, they grabs things around and finds things, but then takes them up and stores them in a tree, kind of like in his home, in a tree. And finally, I saw one hand, only one hand of the crowd went up, and I held the mic, and the kid said, I'm pretty sure the answer is Jesus, but it sounds like a squirrel. Yeah. So, yeah, I love the reality of that. You know, it's kind of like the answer's always got to be Jesus, right? And maybe that's part of the challenge for us as I'm doing this series on how we think about what it means to be the prodigal species, because we're so locked into what we think we know this is all about because we know the prodigal son story. So it's all about how God loves us and God includes everybody, and even the prodigal son who went and wasted everything is welcome back. Father comes running and embraces, and so we think of this thing as being about God's love for us or God's love for others. But it becomes very myopic. It becomes very self-focused in that sense. And so I introduced this concept of the whole species in terms of our being a prodigal species to our reality itself. That if reality itself is God in a personified kind of way, if we would only understand the sacredness of God's being in all of life, then probably what we've experienced is that we're really more prodigals than participants. We're really more in a state of having kind of taken advantage of God, of creation, of life itself. And not all of us, and I'm speaking universally, I'm not just speaking here, but I'm speaking more universally of humanity, not all of us have really come to our senses, as it does in the story when the son finally says, you know, I'm finally come to my senses, I've destroyed everything, I need to go back home and hope they'll forgive me. Not all of us have come to our senses as a species. In fact, many people would argue that we've moved past that point of no return, of being able to come to our senses. I would say, who knows what that holds. I think life is going to get more challenging. I think climate is going to get worse before it gets any better, if it gets better. But I think our response to that, our response to that as people of faith is critical. Because I think what we tell, the story we tell to others, changes not only what may happen down the line for future generations, but it also changes how others might experience beauty and depth and meaning even in this time. And that may be a story we have to learn how to tell. Because seeing God as reality personified is hard enough. We're so used to seeing God as objectified. We're used to seeing God as something other than, something that we kind of call on from time to time rather than the ground of being in which we live, in which we are connected. So this idea that if we're going to think about God, we have to include evidential reality. What's evident has got to be part of that. God is that, all of that, and then maybe more. But if we don't include reality, then we're skirting probably one of our most important relationships, which is our relationship with reality itself. So then I saw this other thing I suggested, and I think on the second part, was this idea of anthropocentrism versus ecocentrism. Anthropocentrism is kind of like it's all about us. Productivity, wealth, the land, the resources, it's all about us. Or, as I termed it later on, I said our guiding myth is I before we, especially after me. I before we, you can say it with me. I before we, especially after me. That's your new phrase. When you can just hold on to that mythic sort of summation and see if not, that's what's not going on in almost everything we see. Whether it's politics, whether it's religion, whether it's your family relationships with others, whether it's your relationship with your spouse or partner, I before we, especially after me. It's so hard for us to think of others first. And yet that seems to be really at the core essence of who Jesus was, right? It just seems like that was the essence, the idea that if you want to experience love, you have to love. If you want to experience the idea of receiving joy and delight, you have to give joy and delight. It just doesn't come first. Our brains are designed to react to what comes first because our brains are designed for protection. Our brains are designed sort of to keep ourselves safe. So we get jealous, or we get envious, or we get afraid, or we get scared of things, and we react. But that's not our full evolving. Our full evolution towards the frontal part of our brain, our frontal cortex, is all about learning how to see spaciousness, how to risk vulnerability, and how to discover something larger than ourselves. And that's what faith invites us into, is this larger sense of self. So I have this new idea that I want to suggest to us. Because where most of us sort of idolatrize, not most of us, but I mean most of Christianity has been historically, I think, could be historically defined as having idolatrized belief. You know, they made an idolatry out of belief. They've made an idolatry out of Scripture. They've made an idolatry out of traditions or orthodoxy or doctrine. And Jesus was anything but that. The very fact that Jesus goes into Jerusalem, not as the Messiah that everybody was thinking he'd be, just like the Roman emperor, only this one was going to be God's king. Jesus came in and said, "You don't know what makes for peace. If only you knew what makes for peace." And he wasn't talking about the Roman Empire, although the Roman Empire had its influence. He was talking about Jerusalem, the very ground of their faith. If only you knew what made for peace. What's he talking about? What makes for peace? What's actually required for there to be peace? I think we toss the word around like love. You tossed it around in beautiful poetic ways. How do we do it? How do we make peace? What are the things that make for peace? And sadly, what we end up with in our institution are beliefs and doctrines. What we end up in our country are doctrines of sort of patriotism and individualism and work ethics. But what actually makes for peace? Because the Roman Empire's process of peace, Pax Romana, was about, well, you conquer, you establish rule, and you let people live as long as they stay within the rules. And so it was an overpowering, whereas Jesus was more about empowering everyone he met, especially those on the margins. He was about equalizing the reality. Or, if you looked at the Old Testament, justice. And if we look at what justice means, its root word, it means putting things in right relationship. That's where we find ourselves today. We find ourselves out of relationship with reality. Because reality is trying to say, we're kind of overshooting what I can give you. But we're still pushing that boundary. We're still pushing the limits of what our relative, the earth, can offer us. So this idea of loving our beliefs, or can we learn to believe in what we love? Christianity has, I think, historically been about loving its beliefs as a way of defining itself against others. But what if we start with where we're passionate? What if we start with where we love? What if we start with what moves us and what connects us to something bigger and deeper? And then we believe in that and practice that. I was going to read this story. I don't know that I'll read the whole thing. I'll skip around on it. Y'all know this story. Let's see if I can find it here. Let's see. Here it is. All right, yeah. How many of you remember the story by Shel Silverstein called The Giving Tree? Some of y'all read that. You might have read that to your kids when your kids were young. Some of y'all who are younger in here might have remembered having that read to you. I'm just going to start it off. Once there was a tree, and she loved a little boy. And every day the boy would come, and he would play and gather the leaves, and then make them into crowns and play king of the forest. He would climb up her trunk and swing from her branches and eat apples, and they would play hide and seek together. And when he was tired, he would sleep in her shade. And the boy loved the tree very much, and the tree was happy. But time went by, and the boy grew older, and the tree was often alone. Then one day, the boy came to the tree, and the tree said, "Come, boy, come and climb in my trunk, up my trunk, swing from my branches, eat apples, and play in my shade, and be happy." The boy said, "I'm too big to climb and play. I want to buy things and have fun. I want some money. Can you give me some money?" "I'm sorry," said the tree, "but I have no money. I only have leaves and apples. But you could take my apples. Take my apples and sell them in the city, then you will have money." So if you remember the story, I'll just kind of move ahead here. If you remember the story, what happens is that eventually he has money, but then he needs resources to build a home, have a family of his own. And so the tree says, "Well, take my branches, take my larger branches, and you can have them for lumber." Then eventually he does that, and he even takes the trunk until finally and then he takes the trunk because he wants to build a boat, because now he's tired of what he's built here, and he's lived his life, and now he wants to see an adventure, and so he wants to sail out. He gets the rest of the tree, builds a boat, and he sails out. And then at the very end, when he's kind of lived his life and he's old, he comes back to the tree. And he said, let's see, after a long time, the boy came back. But the tree saw him and said, "I'm sorry, I have nothing left to give you. My apples are gone, my teeth are too weak for apples," said the boy. "My branches are gone," said the tree. "You can't swing in them." He said, "I'm too old to swing on your branches." "My trunk is gone," she said. "So you cannot climb." And then he interrupted, said, "I'm too old to climb and too tired." "I'm very sorry," said the tree. "I wish that I could give you something. I have nothing left. I'm just an old stump." Well, he said, "I don't need very much, just a quiet place to sit and rest. I'm very tired." "Well," said the tree, straightening herself up as much as she could, "an old stump is good for sitting and resting, so come sit down and rest." And the tree was happy. So, I loved that story as a kid. There's something really wrong with that story. There's something really wrong with the fact that we loved that story. Over time, of course, both in terms of maybe feminism and maybe a feminist consciousness has given us some sense of awareness about the fact the tree's a woman and the boy, a guy, is sort of taking advantage and sort of, wearing the woman down and basically, using up all of her resources until she's given. I mean, there's that way of playing out the narrative, but there's something else that's also parallel to that, which is the way in which we treat resources. The way in which we treat the life around us as if it's something as a part instead of someone. And that's a real challenge, I think, for us to learn to see life as more than a thing, as more than a utility. In fact, how can we even begin to see everything in our lives not as utilitarian, as something for my comfort or my anxiety or even my affection, but actually something I do not know and I need to know better? That's a real challenging way to be related to life, I think. One of the quotes that I have on the back of this is by Rumi, which says, "Wherever you are, whatever you do, be in love." Another quote that we often use from the Sufist poet Rumi, another quote we often use is, "Wherever you find yourself, be the soul of that place." What does that mean? Be the soul of that place. Where have you ever felt like you have suddenly found yourself in the midst of either life, nature, or a crowd, or your office, and suddenly you've had the sense of you're the soul of that space? Have you ever felt that way? What would that feel like? One of the biggest challenges for us is to kind of get out of this sense of self and be more in the sense of other, to find a larger sense of ourselves by finding ourselves in relationships to others. And one of the easiest ways to do that is by curiosity. How can you practice curiosity in all of your encounters? I'm looking so forward to this next weekend. I don't think my sister's watching, so I'm going to say this. But I'd say it to her either as well. And my brother-in-law stands back there, and I've already told him about this. But this weekend, my sister and my brother and my older brother, and then my brother's husband, Stan, and then my wife and my older brother's wife and my sister's husband, we're all going to gather for the first time we've gathered in a long time without all the siblings and kids and grandkids and stuff, nieces and nephews. It's just going to be the four of us plus our spouses. And the first thing my wife Linda says when she goes out with my sister, she says, well, maybe, we're really looking forward to this. And then my sister says to her, yeah, but maybe we shouldn't talk politics or religion. Because half of my family are very conservative, the other half of my family are very progressive liberal. And it always ends up getting kind of tense. Somebody always brings up guns. Somebody always brings up climate change or the lack of climate change. Somebody always brings up, hell or heaven. I mean, it can get really interesting really fast. Or I should say, it can get really uncomfortable really fast. And so when Linda told me that, my first thought was, I guess we should avoid it. My second thought was, what does it mean to be the soul in the space we find ourselves? It doesn't mean avoiding. It also doesn't mean confronting. There are times and places we need to confront injustice and stand for it, but maybe not in a space that is requiring more relationship than fight or flight. So I'll tell you how it all goes next weekend. Or the weekend after that, actually, because we're meeting on Sunday evening. I'm not looking to invite any kind of conflict. What I'm looking to invite is relationship that's authentic and that is curious, and to see where that goes. What if you were thinking about your relationship with life itself and how to be intimate in life, how do you do that with a person? How do you do that with your partner? How do you explore greater intimacy if not through sensitivity and through attentiveness and through vulnerability? What is life inviting us to do in this time of climate confusion? What is God as reality inviting us to do? And what's the story we're invited to tell? So I just want to end with this last little thought then. The things that can make for peace, first and foremost, begin with not knowing. Entering our spaces with a compassionate curiosity, Young, come on, that's not knowing. And that's hard. Because even when someone says, all you have to do is say, tell me more about that, why you think that way. And in the back of your mind, you're still thinking, let's see how I can turn this around to make sure they see the right way. It's hard to let go of our agendas. It doesn't say if you're letting go of your agenda, it means you're letting go of what you know is right. What it says is, it's letting go of what you know is right so you can really experience what's right there. And that's where we miss it every single time. So I invite you to try that out this weekend. Set aside the agendas and just invite yourself into a space so instead of knowing what's right, you can begin to know what is actually right there. Amen.
On a sleepy, endless ocean, when the world lay in a dream, there was rhythm in the splash and roll, but not a voice to sing. So the moon fell on the breakers, and the morning warmed the waves, till a single cell did jump and hum for joy as though to say, this is my home, this is my only home, this is the only sacred ground that I have ever known. Should I stray in the dark night alone, rock me, goddess, in the gentle arms of Eden. Then the day shone bright around her, till the one turned into two, and the two into 10,000 things, and all things into new. And on some virgin beachhead, one lonesome critter crawled, and he looked about and he shouted out in his most astonished drawl, this is my home, This is my only home. This is my only sacred ground that I have ever known. Should I stray in the dark night alone? Rock me, goddess, in the gentle arms of Eve. Then all the sky was buzzing, and the ground was carpet green, and the weary children of the woods went dancing in between. And the people sang rejoicing when the fields were glad with grain, this song of celebration from their cities on the plain. This is my home. This is my only home. This is the only sacred ground that I have ever known. Should I stray in the dark night alone? Rock me, goddess, in the gentle arms of Eve. Now there's smoke across the harbor, and there's factories on the shore, and the world is ill with greed and will and enterprise of war. But I will lay my burdens in the cradle of your grace, and the shining beaches of your love, and the sea of your embrace. 'Cause this is my home. This is my only home. This is the only sacred ground that I have ever known. Should I stray in the dark night alone? Rock me, goddess, in the gentle arms of Eve. Rock me, goddess, in the gentle arms of Eve.
All right. So happy St. Patty's Day to you again, and so glad to see you all this morning, and glad to have you all online as well. Hope you will come back. Next week is Palm Sunday, and so we have special guests and music. Then also the Sunday after that, of course, is Easter, and Easter will be in here at 11:11 as we do every year. And so I hope you can join us. I can only say this much: it will probably be our last Easter in here, but I can't tell you anything other than that. What does that mean, Tom? So much unknown. Isn't it exciting? I hope you find it exciting. So let's stand for our benediction. And this is a traditional Irish benediction. Many of us know this one from church, from being in a traditional church. And I've given a little tiny twist at the end. May the road rise to meet you. May the wind be always at your back. May the sun shine warm upon your face, and the rain fall soft upon your way. Until we meet again, and may life itself hold you in the hollow of its delightful and sacred hands. Amen.